All right, good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Josie Malloy. I'm the President and CEO for the Grants Pass and Josephine County Chamber of Commerce. And today we are hosting the Rural Fire Protection District Educational Forum. This will be on the May 18th Special Election Ballot. Joining me also will be Kate Lasky. She is our Government Affairs Chair. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Josie, and thank you for facilitating this forum.
Yeah, this is, a big part of what our Government Affairs Committee does do. We want to make sure all our voters are educated before they vote. We will be running this format as a panel, so I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Ben Frodenberg. He is an attorney at Davis, Frodenberg, Day and Driver. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We also have Brian Robinson. He is a retired deputy chief with the Grants Pass Department of Public Safety.
Yeah,
Welcome.
Thank you.
And we also have Michelle Binker. She's the interim coordinator for the Josephine County Local Public Safety Coordinating Council. And she was also the former legislative assistant and chief of staff to Representative Carl Wilson.
Thank you, Josie.
All right, and then we'll be kicking off this forum with a video that Jess Webb prepared for us.
In the area surrounding the city of Grants Pass, Oregon, the way fire departments protect the community is unusual, and you should know why. First, in most parts of the country, communities are protected and financed through a tax system. City and rural communities alike can create a fire department or fire district funded through taxes, much like a city, school district, or water district. Josephine County is home to 4 rural fire districts and the Grants Pass Department of Public Safety's City Fire Department. But several communities outside of Grants Pass have no fire district, including Sunny Valley, Colonial Valley, Hugo, Merlin, Galice, Fort Vanoy, Jones Creek, New Hope, Jerome Prairie, Murphy, Wilderville, and Wonder. That's about 350 square miles and more than 16,000 properties. How does it work here? Well, people who own property pay a private fire company to protect their homes through an annual or monthly fee, similar to how a person would pay for their car insurance or electric bill. Through the years, at least 5 private fire departments have operated in the non-fire district area of Josephine County. Currently, 2 agencies compete for each property owner's support. Property owners have the right to choose between the 2 providers or have no fire protection at all. The system is unique and causes many challenges. For instance, when 911 is called to report a house fire in a rural neighborhood, early on, it's challenging to confirm whose property the fire is on, and subsequently, which company is responsible for putting it out. Hundreds of property owners in the area don't have an agreement with a private provider, thinking they won't have a fire. When they do, the agencies that respond may attempt to recover costs later by billing non-customers. As high as the recovery costs may feel to the non-subscribers, it doesn't cover the cost of equipping and maintaining crews in readiness 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Furthermore, many emergencies occur on multiple properties or in public spaces, such as roads, interstates, schools, and parks, which makes sorting out who should be responsible for responding to the emergency even more complicated. There are no significant regulations imposed by Josephine County to be a private fire department. Even liability insurance to operate as a fire department is not required, and not all private fire departments are qualified for all types of emergencies. For instance, medical emergencies, water rescues, and vehicle accidents involve specialized training in addition to traditional firefighter training, much of which requires state-level licensing, such as emergency medical services. Consider this scenario. Somebody has a medical emergency in their home. Aside from medical licensing required for firefighters to provide treatment, there is no specific requirement here for the private company's firefighter to take emergency driver's training, pass a physical fitness test, a drug screening, or even go through a background check. These are only a few of the examples of challenges within the current system. In May of 2021, the community will have the opportunity to choose whether to leave things as they are or create a tax-supported fire district to provide a more efficient system for emergency services. If the measure passes, like other fire districts in Oregon, management is separate and autonomous from county government. It will not be managed by county commissioners, but have its own elected board, which holds the agency accountable and helps with the long-term guidance and critical decisions. Because the two private fire departments currently operating in the area are not required to make their financial records public, it's not clear how much of the generated revenue is kept as profit or is being used for the day-to-day operations of the company. Under the new system, revenue would be collected through property tax and vary depending on the value of the property. The proposed rate for the district is $1.74 per $1,000 of assessed value, using the county's system of assessment. As an example, the owner of property valued at $200,000 would pay about $348 a year. When the rate is compared to other nearby fire districts, the cost is lower than all other fire districts similar in size and service. This is made possible in part due to the proposed district being geographically large, and while it is considered rural, it's still well populated. According to an assessment leading up to the ballot measure, the proposed rate reflects the ability to maintain current levels of emergency service and even improve upon them. The rate is also lower than the amount most property owners currently pay to private fire departments. Costs for the proposed fire district would be spread over all landowners, including those who currently choose not to subscribe to either private fire department. The fire district will also be able to apply for grants for things like equipment, staffing, fuels management, and training, an option unavailable to the private companies providing service now. This will assist in the reduction of overall costs and help prepare for future emergencies. A tax-supported district could also request state-funded emergency resources under the Oregon Conflagration Act. This process puts a request on the governor's desk to start moving personnel and equipment to an emergency. It's commonly how we receive assistance from departments across the state during major wildfires. And while nobody wants to experience an emergency of that size, it's happened here before, and it will happen again. Currently, the Conflagration Act is requested only in a roundabout way because the private providers have no authority to do so. A chief from another department must make the request, or county commissioners must collectively choose to request state help. Under the new system, precious time would be saved in the beginning of a major incident. The new fire district could additionally implement a fuels management program to create defensible space for the property owners who need assistance. Fuels management is the first line of defense as wildland fires approach. Without it, fire departments cannot safely stay and make a stand against an approaching fire. Other options could be to increase staffing, decrease response times, and add additional emergency resources in areas that need it most using choices based on need and not profit. To learn more about the upcoming ballot measure, go to voteforfiredistrict.com.
All right, thank you very much. We are now going to move into the question portion of our panel. And if you are watching on Facebook, you do have the option to put your question into the chat box. And if we have time at the end, we will get to those questions. So please put them in there. And we're going to kick it off with our first question. Why was a $1.74 rate chosen for this fire district?
Who tackles that one?
I can probably jump in. It's easy. Essentially, that is the number that the Board of County Commissioners decided would be a palatable number for the voters. They looked at it. Originally, the consultants looked at a slightly higher rate. The commissioners were concerned that might not be something the voters would be happy with. And so they determined that $1.74 was a fair rate to ask for.
All right, great, thank you. And we'll move on to the next question.
Okay. For question number 2, the $1.74 rate is a permanent tax rate. Can this ever be increased?
I'll tackle that one. That rate will be established by the voters when they approve this on May 18. That rate can only be changed by another vote of the voters at a later time and only proposed and then put on the ballot. So it is locked in place at this point, but subject to voter approval for a change later.
All right, thank you. What are the main benefits of having a fire district?
Michelle, would you be willing to jump on that one?
I think Jess's video explained pretty well that some of the main benefits of having the fire district is that becomes the jurisdiction having authority over fire response and all hazard response. And the fire district can apply for grants to offset the cost of equipment and training, as well as fuels reduction work. And the fire district can minimize the amount of time it takes between determining that you've got a major event on hand and summoning additional resources from across the state.
All right, thank you. Anything else anyone would like to add?
I might add that what the district provides is accountability then, because there'll be 5 elected board members who will then go through the budgeting process. That's a public process. The public will be able to know how dollars are being allocated. The public will be able to select those persons they want to serve on their board. Right now, with the 2 private fire companies involved, there's no way of knowing the dollars and cents of their operations. And so it really provides transparency and accountability. I think it's a great step forward. And I might add, I'm on the panel not as a lawyer, but because I live in the unprotected area that would then become a part of this new fire district. I'm very excited about that prospect.
Great. Anyone else want to add anything before we move on? All right, on to the next one.
So what are the disadvantages of this fire district?
I get asked that fairly often, and without sounding too biased here, I've given it an awful lot of thought trying to come up with a reasonable answer to that. But the bottom line is, in my way of thinking, is there is no disadvantage to it. It is simply the reason that this is the norm for delivering this kinds of service. There are already 4 fire districts in the county. Even little places like Wolf Creek understood that this was the very best way to organize this and to do it. You've got the Illinois Valley, who have a very active fire district because that's the best way to deliver that kind of service. You've got Applegate and who am I forgetting? Even Williams. So the bottom line is, if you really study how the fire district works, it is simply the most efficient way to do this, to deliver this kind of service. It has been mentioned before. One of the true beauties of it is that the citizens finally have an opportunity to have direct input about individual items that they're concerned about. They can call up their board member and say, I like this or I don't like this. They can attend meetings. They can go to the budget meetings and say, I don't like where this money is being spent, or I think more money should be spent on this. It's just the most effective way to do this.
All right, anyone else have anything to add before we move on? Okay, so you guys have already kind of explained this a little bit, and it was also in the video. You can explain it a little more in depth. How will the fire district be managed?
Ben, would you be willing to jump on that?
First off, a rural fire district is a tried and true method of providing fire protection services, a common enemy, and it's a way people have banded together to do so in a common way. The rural fire district is a creature of statute. It's ORS, Oregon Revised Statute 478. And under that set of statutes, a board of directors is provided for. And so when this is on the May 18 ballot, voters will also have an opportunity to select 5 board members to serve on the initial board. Those board members then have the responsibility of organizing the district and running the district, and as I mentioned before, doing a budgetary process that's a public process as well. The board will have the authority, especially in this initial period, to determine how services will be provided immediately. And then, again, will be up to the board, and I'm not a candidate for the board and won't be on the board, but that board will be charged with providing services going forward and determining how that best will occur in the near term and in the longer term.
Thank you. Our next question, this district covers a large area. Is that a concern?
Well, I'll jump in if nobody wants to address that one. It seems a little bit large to us, but if you look all around the state and the rest of the nation, for that matter, it's not a particularly large fire district. The way that these things are organized, I mean, it is simply built so that it can grow and stretch and address the needs of a growing area. This is not a particularly large area to cover, so no, I don't have any concerns at all about the district's ability to manage that.
All right, anyone else want to jump in on concerns? Because I know there has been a few brought up. If you could just kind of address some of those other concerns.
May I, the concerns about the size of the fire district?
Yes.
Yeah, I might jump in here. What you're traditionally seeing in the fire service is that fire districts tend to consolidate together and not come apart. And in today's day and age, you could talk to any of the other fire districts in this county, and you would notice on the map in the video that they're significantly smaller, with the exception of Illinois Valley's Fire Protection District, which is starting to come into that size. But they all struggle to get people to work part-time or volunteer their time to provide the manpower for the services. So when you're looking at the smaller districts like Williams and Wolf Creek, it becomes even more difficult because of the pool that you have to operate from. So, if we were to split up all those communities that came up in the video, it'd be very hard for them on an individual level to have somebody responding 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their budgets would be smaller, and they would have to try and find volunteers to roll out of bed in the middle of the night or even go man a station. And so the trend, I believe, that we're seeing in this country towards paid firefighters in larger districts is probably the way that it's going to be over the foreseeable future. There's several reasons for that. In today's society, it's just getting more and more difficult to find people that have enough time to operate. Training is significantly more in depth than it used to be. It takes a lot of time even to be a volunteer or reserve now. It's pretty high. And furthermore, there's some other ancillary reasons. One of them being the people that work for larger fire districts that are paid are typically trained, they're on duty, they're available, they're committed to that position for a certain amount of time during their schedules. And also in this area, it's difficult to find volunteers because of drug tests, honestly, because people have a different lifestyle than they did 20 or 30 years ago. And that's just not something that we found a way to integrate in the fire service, and for good reasons in some ways.
Great, thank you. And this kind of goes into it too. So since it is such a large area and you're kind of dealing with some remote areas, will new fire stations be created? I know that's probably going to be more of a decision of the board, but in your opinion, will new stations be built?
What I have heard from candidates for the fire district and some of the folks that work in the private sector alike, and I believe it was also brought up, if I'm not mistaken, Brian, in the assessment that the folks did, was that they had considered the idea of trying to bring some more staffing on in areas where it was light. Frequently there's a goal in the emergency service sector, whether it's police, fire, or ambulance, on being able to get to calls at a certain amount of time. And they add that up to try and make sure the responses are good. And yes, there are some areas and parts of this community where it does take longer to get to some of those outlying areas. And I would hope that they would take that under consideration. And so it has been discussed, but ultimately, yes, that would be up to the board that's elected.
All right, anyone else want to jump in before we move on? All right, on to the next one.
Okay, so we've heard that the new fire district would be allocated $1.5 million from the state. It's a state grant. And the question is really, what would this money be used for? And can the county receive it if we don't have a fire district?
Well, I can jump in on that one. It may not be actually appropriate or accurate to call it a grant. This is a one-time appropriation from the state general fund for disbursement to Josephine County in the event that the fire district is created, and it's earmarked specifically for startup costs. So that is what we'd be looking at. And the board, of course, gets to decide how it's going to organize the fire district, and the startup cost would be germane to that.
And I would also throw in that it will probably be used for interim operating funds. You know, if the district is created, there won't be tax dollars available to run that until the end of the year.
Bridge
so
funding.
There are costs associated as soon as the district is formed that they need to start addressing. They need to hire legal representation and accountants and all those kinds of things, and start doing some training. And so there are things that they will need money for before the tax dollars are available. And so some of that, I think, will probably go for that.
All right. Okay, moving on to the next one. And this is kind of a question for once the board is created, but in your guys' minds, what should be the 3-year goals for this district?
Well, that's interesting that you ask it in that way, because like you said, the obvious answer is that these are something that the board is going to have to discuss at great length. I'm hoping that the board members look at this and take that first 3-year period to stabilize the district, get it up on its feet and running as healthy as it possibly can, and then begin to analyze what kinds of changes they would like to make, whether it be increased personnel or more stations or additional services or whatever it might be. But they're going to be very, very busy in that first 3 years, just getting this thing up and running smoothly and getting all the players up to speed. Even the board members have a lot of training they're going to need to do their job well, and that's going to take some time. So.
All right, and I do have, Jess, did you want to add to that?
Oh, I was just going to say, I would hope within 3 years that they have streamlined the service and prioritized what the community would hope and expect out of their fire district.
Yeah. So for the board, how long are the terms?
Ben?
Those are 4 years.
4 year.
There, 2 of them are 2-year terms, and 3 of them are 4-year terms. And then after the first 2-year terms are up, then everybody transitions into 4-year terms. But it's so that we don't change all the members all at once. So in the initial board, there'll be 2 people that serve 2 years, and 3 people that serve 4 years.
And as I recall, they draw lots to decide who has the shorter term and who has the longer term out of that initial board.
Right.
All right, great. Kate, did you have any other questions before we move into the audience questions?
I don't. I really appreciated the video. I thought it was very informative, and I'd love to have time for audience questions. I'd be happy to ask the first one. It's from Shanti Worthington. She asks, please tell me more about the assistance program to help property owners clear space around the home.
No one seems to want to jump right into that. An example that you might actually see in motion right now is if you travel on I-5 north from Grants Pass, along the freeway there, you see fuels reduction going on. And what they're doing is they're going in and they're cleaning out the underbrush so that when fire does inevitably move through the area, it will not be as severe or as problematic as it would be. So one of the hopes is that this new district will have enough resources to be able to go out and do that, is actually assist homeowners with evaluating their property, figuring out if there's some fuels reduction they can do to make their property safer for them and their neighbors. And it's probably one of the most effective ways to deal with potential wildfire issues that we have. Dealing with it ahead of time is much better than dealing with it, during the event.
Great, thank you. So our next question from the audience, and sorry if we're pronouncing your names wrong. Jerry V asked, are there any other places in the country where private providers are not required to meet basic minimum requirements to be classified as a fire department based on NFPA standards?
To my knowledge, this is the most unique situation in the country. There is no other place that I can draw a parallel to this. Without exaggeration, Josie, you could absolutely today buy a fire extinguisher and a pickup truck and call yourself a fire department and go to work and sell subscriptions. That is unique to Josephine County.
It's also the only place that I think we know of in the world where emergency first response fire protection is provided by private fire providers that compete from door to door. There are other private fire providers throughout the country, but usually it's under a contractual system, similar to how our ambulance is provided locally.
That's right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience. If there isn't, this is Mike Cartmill, if there is a new district formed, will that allow the district to leverage federal, state, and nonprofit funding for fuels reduction and mitigation work?
Michelle, talk about that.
Yes, absolutely. In addition to which, being a part of the community provides enhanced opportunities for one-on-one education. You know what the needs are, and you can get out there and speak directly to your neighbors within the community. And then in addition to the funds that we will have coming in from the tax rate, we can leverage those grants, applying for additional grants either through ODF or national programs to help educate and do fuels reduction work.
Right, thank you. So another question from the audience. This is from Valerie Lovelace. What happens when someone has no insurance now? Who pays the bill if they can't?
You want me to take a crack at this one, Brian?
Thank you, Jess.
There is a portion of the community that doesn't have a contract with either private provider. They, in many cases, have decided, well, somebody may show up if I need them, or I don't think I'm going to have a fire or whatnot. We do see a lot of that. And frequently, some of the providers that have been here in the past do try to recover their costs under a similar claim that you would see in the medical services. If somebody, they used to say for a long time that if somebody was unconscious on the road and the ambulance showed up, you would assume they'd want help so you could take them to the hospital and potentially bill for your services later. To my knowledge, the private providers that have done so have always won in court. And those bills tend to be pretty high. Some insurance companies have started paying for them. Some of them have not. But I think they've been in the 4-figure, low 5-figure range in the past. And the only other thing that I would add about that to kind of wrap it up is, if we had 200 house fires a year and those private providers charged $10,000 every time, it would not be, if nobody was paying a subscription fee, it wouldn't even be close to enough money to staff what is available now. Most of the money that is spent for a fire service is being prepared to go to a fire, to having guys sitting in a fire station with engines ready to go and to be trained to go do those things. So, I think I could probably speak for any private provider that has been here in this community. The subscription model is the better way to go because those guys need to pay for their services up front before the bell even rings when they go out. So yeah, it's a difficult thing. And some people have been harnessed. They've had to deal with those bills in the past.
I'd also like to throw in that before this point is missed, that people need to understand that the rate that they're currently paying, if they're a subscriber and the rate they're currently paying, they're subsidizing about 1 in 3 of their neighbors who choose not to participate. And it's really important that they understand that if you have a house, if you have a street that has 10 houses on it, you could just assume that there's about 3 houses on that block, it's about 30%, who choose not to participate. Well, that simply means that you as a subscriber to one of the companies are paying their bill because that company has to be ready 24/7 to come and deal with the problem. And because of the fact that you're paying your subscription, it allows them to exist and be there and respond. So this system will fix that problem. Everyone will have to participate. To me, it's like law enforcement in the military. I don't think that we should choose whether or not we should support those kinds of agencies. Those are societal needs that we all need to share. And so this would dissolve that problem.
I might also add then as well that we do have people in the community that don't pay the subscription service because maybe they're not interested so much, knowing that their house is so far out in the fire district that they don't think there'd be much less, or that wouldn't be a whole lot to deal with if when the fire departments really got there. These private providers have saved properties in the past, but effectively everybody that lives here is using the fire service whether they have a subscription or not. When they're driving on the road, or their kids go to school, or they go to the church, or they're out on a hike, or they're on the river, the fire department has been activated at any time that somebody would need that service. So they're really, the service that is provided is a ready and waiting force to help people when there's an emergency. And so whether you're paying that subscription service or not, because the private providers go just in case, they're basically getting the service for no charge.
It might be good to point out, I know Valerie Lovelace is a city resident, so she has fire service obviously provided through the city of Grants Pass. This new district would not affect the city of Grants Pass Municipal Fire Department, would not affect Wolf Creek, Applegate, Williams, or Illinois Valley. So all of those established districts that saw fit to do this many, many years ago will remain just as they are. This is a new district for the unprotected area outside the city limits of Grants Pass.
Thank you. Okay, well, another question, actually several more. From Jerry V. Isn't this double taxing us? Why do we need a fire district? Doesn't Oregon Department of Forestry take care of us?
This is a question that we get asked very frequently. Folks don't seem to really aren't clear about what ODF's role is, Oregon Department of Forestry's role is. They are a wildland firefighting agency. They are not tasked with structural firefighting. They are not equipped nor trained. It is not part of their mission to deal with structure fires. Plus the fact that they're only available during fire season. They are not staffed year round. Yes, you do pay a fee to ODF, but that is to protect the wildlands around you and to provide all of those huge cost kinds of things that occur when wildfires occur, things like aircraft and crews and all the multitude of things that have to come in. The two are not parallel at all. They work together when they're out on the fire ground, but ODF has a completely different role to play. They're not going to come in your house. They're not going to stop on the freeway and cut you out of a car that got crashed. They're not going to do CPR on your family member who has gone down. It's a completely separate, different kind of agency, and the two don't really parallel that way at all. So.
All right, thank you. And on to our next question. This is from Sue Dinsmore. Can you talk about mutual aid programs and how they work?
I don't want to control this, but that's an area that I have a lot of expertise in. I've done a lot of work on auto aid and mutual aid systems. Auto aid and mutual aid are simply systems set up beforehand so that neighboring fire departments play well together. And What mutual aid does is that, for instance, the city of Grants Pass looks at the agencies around them, and they look at the qualifications and how they're trained and how they're equipped and how they operate, and they decide that the service that their neighbor is providing will work well with their system. So then no fire department in Oregon, or pretty much any place else for that matter, is big enough to handle every incident that gets thrown at them. We know that. We accept that. There's no way to collect enough money so that any department's big enough to handle anything that comes their way. So mutual aid assures us that we have a system in place where we can bring the people and resources in quickly and efficiently. Auto aid is a little bit different. That simply means that through computer-aided dispatch, when a call comes in, the computer simply looks at the call, knows where all the resources in the area are, doesn't matter who they belong to, which agencies they belong to. It simply looks at all the resources and says, okay, the closest engine is this one, and we'll send it to this particular call because it's closest and it's the best way to do it. It's common for citizens to see fire trucks from another agency in the city of Grants Pass, simply because at that one particular instant, their truck was the closest truck available, and they responded. So it's a very efficient system. It ensures that we're using our resources to the very best and most efficient way that we possibly can. And it's a very, very effective system. Works just great.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Well, Brian, is it true that with the two private fire companies now operating, that system you just described is not available to those private fire companies?
It is available to one of them, not the other. Yes. Yes. And that is simply because it's been determined that they don't yet meet the standards necessary to commingle with their system. Yeah. There's a responsibility here that probably ought to be addressed. If the city of Grants Pass agrees to sign into a mutual aid or an auto aid agreement with another agency, they have to be assured that the people that respond have been vetted, have been trained, and are at least to the standards of their own employees. So because we've invited some other agency to come in and maybe deal with a medical emergency at your home, well, they've come into your home, they have physical contact with you or your family. We have to be very, very careful that the people who come do that have already been vetted, and we make sure that, you know, the problems aren't going to crop up from that relationship.
Thank you. The next question in line, because I think we might come back to that topic. Would someone on the panel be willing to explain the difference between services provided by an all hazards agency versus one that is not?
I can go ahead and take that. All hazard is a term that started to come around more frequently when it describes a fire department. Some fire departments that frequently, you'd probably find that on a shoestring budget, might only respond to fires. But everything else that comes in after that is an entirely different, it's an entirely different discipline. So when we're referring to a fire service that's called all hazards, that means they can pretty much respond to whatever problem a person from 911 is calling 911 rather, other than what might require a law enforcement officer. So if there's a heart attack or a drowning or a rescue or a car accident or a hazardous materials spill, grass fire, forest fire, house fire, car fire, all of these things, you know, the cliche used to be the fire department getting the cats out of the tree. The folks that can go and do all of these things that they're trained for, that would be considered an all hazard fire department.
All right, thank you. So we have another question. Why does it even matter if a provider doesn't meet the NFPA standards?
Well, the standards are in place to make sure that the people who come to assist you when there's a problem are properly trained and equipped and will do the job safely and efficiently. The standards are just simply written so that everybody in the country has a goal to achieve, and fire departments can simply look at the services they're providing and how they're doing it, compare it to the NFPA recommendations, and then do their very best to meet those national standards. It matters a lot that people try to achieve. There aren't many fire departments that achieve absolutely every NFPA standard there is, because some of them are pretty tough and pretty stringent. But every fire department struggles to meet as many of them as they possibly can, because it just makes for better service.
I agree.
Thank you. Another question, will firefighters be trained as paramedics? Will they do public assists?
Well, I would suggest that that's going to be up to the board once again. The career path for a lot of people in fire science now also includes a degree in paramedicine, which is a lot of education, Some of the firefighters that work in the community now are paramedics. I think many of them are EMTs. So again, that would be left up to the board. But if you look at other fire departments around the community, they generally do have some paramedics on duty. Whether it's a fire district fire department that responds and takes patients to the hospital themselves, or it's worked out to be with an ambulance provider like AMR or Mercy Flights. That is a sought after employee as well with a fire district, a firefighter that's cross-trained as a firefighter and paramedicine.
All right, thank you. This is from Mark Jones. What would the startup cost be to create a fire department for the district? One that would deliver the same level of service or higher than is available now?
Brian, was there a number on that in the report? I had heard a number.
I don't know if you can hear me. My video is locked up. Can you still hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. The number has been looked at many times, and a rough estimate is somewhere, if we were to start from scratch, just absolute scratch, you're looking at somewhere between $30 and $40 million to get to where we are right now. The number of stations that are currently available, the number of people that are working, the number of apparatus, the amount of training that's already been provided to our folks, those kinds of people. We're looking at somewhere between $30 and $40 million to recreate that.
All right, thank you. Anything else anyone wants to add on that before we move on?
I probably should finish that statement. The number is probably freaking some people out. I'm not suggesting that they try to figure out where to find $40 million. The point to that is that we're very lucky in this particular instance that there are already providers here in the county that have invested a great deal of time and money and they're already functioning and working here. So we don't have to pony up that $40 million. It's already been invested in the community. It's here. It's already working. But that's not to say that somebody else might disagree with me that's on the board.
And that's a nice segue to the next question in the chat. Roger Hager asks, will the district contract services or opt for the IV model?
Michelle, would you?
Yeah, well, once again, that's a question for the incoming board. So choose your candidates wisely when you're voting for the fire district and for those board members. As was just mentioned, the startup costs to build this thing from scratch would be considerable, $30 to $40 million, whereas the operating budget for an ongoing program, say if the board chose to contract with one of the existing providers, would be in the vicinity of around $5 million. So that's a consideration.
All right, thank you, Michelle. So we have another question. What are the options the new fire district board would have to gain a provider?
I think Michelle kind of hit on that as she was winding up her comment. And I'll just reiterate, as was said before, the $30 to $40 million startup cost is not included in this measure. What is included in the $1.74 per thousand is the operating costs for more or less what is potentially provided now, with possibly the opportunity to decide how that money is going to be spent in an efficient manner. Both agencies now have to spend time and energy competing with each other in marketing and going from door to door to try and make sure that they have clients to sustain their operations. So it would likely be that the board is going to decide to contract with somebody. There are 2 private providers here. They will probably have the opportunity to say their piece if they go this route. There are other private providers in other parts of the company that would probably watch this area and do a study and decide if they could come in and provide, I would think, although that might be a challenge based on our geography. And you could also potentially see other fire districts see if there's some way that they could provide service. That's going to be up to the board.
Oh, great, thank you. So that looks like all of the questions we have in the chat, and we're almost at an hour. So we would love to hear some closing comments from everyone. So we'll start with Brian and let each of our panelists have their closing comments.
All right. Well, again, thank you for this opportunity, Josie. This is a problem that I've been messing with for about 45 years. I've been here in Josephine County involved in emergency services since 1974. The reason that I've worked on it for so many years is because the system that we have now is just really not the way to do it. A competitive system sounds good in a lot of ways. People talk about competition being a good thing. In this particular case, it is not. It is essentially a race to the bottom. The most efficient way to solve our problems here is simply do what everybody else in the entire country has been doing forever, and that is to create a fire district that will oversee our interests in the best and most efficient way possible. So I'm really happy to see that we're moving along, and hopefully this comes to fruition.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Ben, did you want to go next?
Well, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this panel. I've been in Josephine County almost 44 years, and like Brian, I've scratched my head many times as to why we find ourselves in this particular situation. Fire is a common enemy. We need to come together and provide a common defense, and that's what a rural fire protection district does. And as Brian says, all of our neighbors in this area and around the state have figured that out long ago. People may wonder why are we here at this particular time. The county commissioners put an advisory question on a ballot in May of 2019. At that time, 65% of the voters who voted in that election said they wanted to go forward with forming a district. The commissioners then formed a committee, and then after the committee was a consulting group that came together and put out a consulting report regarding the district. And so for people who really like nitty-gritty facts and figures and details, that report, Consulting Services for Josephine County Fire Protection, of October 30, 2020, is available on the website for yesonfiredistrict.com. So if you haven't had enough detail tonight, you can refer to that report, and I think you'll find it very enlightening and points out in great detail the deficiencies and frankly the dangers of our current setup. Thank you.
Thank you. Jess, do you want to go?
Sure. I have been familiar and in the fire service here since about 1989. I do work for one of the private providers. I have also done volunteer work for Wolf Creek Fire and Illinois Valley Fire and Williams Fire, Search and Rescue Department. I've also done some work for the city of Grants Pass and so on. And so I've been fortunate to be able to stick around as long as I have. I'm an information officer. And, it's become apparent to me as we watch the numbers rise through the years. And I've long felt that the system as it stands is not as efficient as it should be. And it just feels like a time where we shouldn't be worried about how the system operates and just give the system a directive and make sure that it works properly. We're catching up here. The fires of significant magnitude started in the 90s, and they have been on the increase. We can debate why they are, but I don't think this is the time and place for that, because they just are. They're here. And so this is a very high-risk community. And Brian, you're going to stop me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, I think even Merlin, Oregon is considered the top at-risk location in the country, the Merlin, Oregon area.
Yeah, the National Fire Center determined that we have the #1 spot there.
Yeah. And in the meantime, we're having this debate over who should provide what and where, and we don't know how the money's really being allocated by either agency. I can say that working for one of the agencies. And so I strongly, strongly believe that we need to get our act together, at least at the organizational level, because this problem is not going away. And I really hate to say it out loud, but I don't think it's going to get better. And so I do believe that it is time to streamline what we have and have it ready to go, to do our best to get to those fires before they become big and problematic at a level that we don't want to bring attention to nationally. We've had some heartache this last year, and that problem is going to continue to stay in this region. And I just think as a community, we need to be prepared for it. This is the best way.
Great, thank you. And Michelle?
Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Kate, for hosting this forum. And I would certainly like to underscore everything that Ben, Brian, and Jess have said in wrapping up. At the beginning of the program, you mentioned my employment situations, and I wouldn't want it to be construed that I am here under any authority or representing the opinions of past or current employment. Probably most importantly, I am a resident of Josephine County and specifically Illinois Valley, where we have had an all hazards community-based fire district since the mid-50s. It's one of the few things that my neighbors and I can agree on is a community good, an asset worth defending and funding. And I would certainly encourage my neighbors in the rest of Josephine County to give serious consideration to establishing their own fire district. Probably the most important reason that I'm here is that I am also a candidate for the board of directors for the Illinois Valley Fire District Position 3. And I just believe that they're an important asset. And I definitely encourage your vote.
May I throw one more thing in, Josie, before we run out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
Just real quickly, please make sure that you research the candidates. The candidates are at least as important as the creation of the district itself. If we don't get good candidates on the board, then we don't have an effective system. So please do your research. Find candidates that are encouraging in their attitude about the district. I've actually seen some candidates flat out come out and say, I don't believe in the fire district. I don't want people to vote for it, but I'm running for the board. So it's really important that you know who you're voting for, and please do your research.
Yeah, and speaking to that, Brian, one of the ways that people can get to know their candidates is reading the voters pamphlet. Candidates who took the time to write and submit a statement published in the Josephine County Clerk's voters pamphlet, which is available from the clerk's website for free and is also mailed to all the households in Josephine County. And speaking to that also, Josie and maybe Jess, people who have additional questions tonight, how can they get answers to their questions as we run out of time?
Well, I can go in. People are welcome to contact me on my Facebook page. And there's also a number for the Political Action Committee that is supporting this fire district, and you can call there or write there. The number's not handy to me real quick. I can potentially look it up real fast. I'll try and put it in the notes after this if people want to scroll down to the bottom of the notes, because I don't want to take up more time. But there's a lot of people that can answer questions for folks here.
And the website itself is a great source to go to find more information.
Great.
I can pull it up. It just happens to be right here. The number for the Political Action Committee that I did the cartoon for is 541-249-9936 if they want to get a hold of somebody.
Great. Thank you, Jess. And we really appreciate all of you taking your time, Brian, Ben, Jess, and Michelle, and Kate. We appreciate this. This was very valuable. And just a reminder, ballots will be mailed on the 28th, so you should be getting them in your mailbox soon. And we just strongly encourage you to be educated on everything you vote on. We'll also be doing a forum for the public safety levy on Wednesday, the same format at 6 p.m. You can join us and put your questions in the chat box for that too. So thank you so much. This is also recorded, so it'll be available on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and also on our website, grantspasschamber.org. So please share with your friends and family. We want to make sure that they get the right information. Thank you for joining us and have a great night.
Thank you.